Good evening, I'm Klaudia Czerwińska and you're watching World News Tonight live from Warsaw. U.S. troops will continue to be stationed in Poland. Today's relocation is by no means a reduction of armed forces in Poland or Europe, said Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk in response to the news of U.S. troops leaving a military hub in southeastern Poland. More on that in just a moment, but before we dive in, let's take a look at tonight's headlines. The urgent meeting of the United Nations Security Council on Ukraine concludes in New York. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk meets with representatives of the automotive industry amid chaos caused by U.S. tariffs. Polish presidential hopeful Rafał Trzaskowski pays a visit to a town dubbed Poland's political bellwether. This is a relocation and not retreat, Polish politicians are assuring the public, as the U.S. troops set to leave the Jasionka military base are in the process of being reassigned to other military bases across Poland. Meanwhile, Jasionka hub will continue operations supported by Poland and NATO allies. So why has this announcement caused so much concern? Zuzanna Jurek has an answer to this question.
Looking at these images, some may mistakenly assume that this is a defeat retreat. But Polish politicians insist that this is not a withdrawal but a relocation of US forces to other military bases across Poland.
US troops will continue to be stationed in Poland. Today's relocation is by no means a reduction of armed forces in Poland or Europe. We have reassurances from the American side, and I hope that they will come true.
This move is justified as a result of multilateral NATO decisions regarding the redistribution of Allied troops.
US troops are staying in Poland. In accordance with the decision made at the NATO summit in Washington, the nature of the mission in Jasionka is changing. The current tasks of American soldiers in Jasionka is being taken over by other allies. US troops will remain in Poland, but in other locations. Now, the mission in Jasionka mainly involves Norwegian, German, British and Polish troops alongside other allies. The assumption of responsibility for the security issues of Rzeszów airport and its security is an issue that was previously discussed at the Allied level.
However, despite official declarations, one statement from the US military command, citing cost efficiency, has raised eyebrows. Some experts point out that this is tied to operational expenses.
After a certain period of time, troops need to be relocated to the training facilities. If the US troops are relocated to the regular military installations with direct access to the training facilities, that will save a lot of money.
Others suggest that this language is tailored more for US audiences.
This promise of, well, America first, what's in the US's interest first and foremost, it was something that the administration has been fairly clear on.
However, according to anonymous sources, the Department of Defense might be considering a large-scale withdrawal of up to 10,000 US troops from Europe. Today's relocation plays into these uncertainties.
What the administration has said that it's basically time to right-size the American footprint and save American taxpayers a lot of money. A lot of this is actually about allocating resources to focus on what the United States now under this administration feels are their strategic priorities.
It also raises further concerns about the future of US involvement in Ukraine, especially as Jasionka has served as a key logistics hub for delivering support that Western countries are providing to Kiev.
They were sent to Europe after the Russian aggression, Russian attack to Ukraine, and it was funded by Congress. The Trump administration hasn't asked for extra funding to continue this. So I think that we will see within this year that some American troops will be withdrawn.
And for some within the Polish establishment, today's images only reinforce these concerns.
It's a symbolic change. These kinds of symbols are unfortunate, but sometimes that's how politics works.
For now, however, it is hoped that this relocation is nothing more than symbolic. For TVP World, Zuzanna Jurek.
Tuesday brought urgent diplomatic activity as both UN Security Council and OSCE Permanent Council held talks on Ukraine as requested by Ukraine's Foreign Minister Andrii Sybiha. The meetings will follow Friday's deadly attack on Kryvyj Rih, which killed 20 civilians, including 9 children, the highest number of child casualties in a single attack since 2022. Sonia Gatabiszczan has this report.
This is the United Nations Security Council urgent meeting on Ukraine. It follows Russia's missile attack on Kryvyj Rih, which reportedly killed 20 civilians, including 9 children.
Danilo, forever 15 years old. Alina, forever 15 years old. Danilo and Alina were a couple, and they were buried yesterday together.
Russia has said it only attacks military targets. But let us be clear. This was a ballistic missile, armed with cluster munitions to maximize casualties, that hit residential buildings and a playground in one of Ukraine's most populous cities.
This deadliest attack involving children since the beginning of the war clearly indicates that there is not even a pinch of Kremlin's interest in any ceasefire.
The strike on Kryvyj Rih, which hit a playground, took place on Friday afternoon.
So it was at a time when families would be there, parents, grandparents with their children would be there. So, to choose that particular time of day is a strong indication that the objective was to maximize civilian casualties.
This is a huge tragedy when parents bury their children or their grandchildren. He was a golden child. He loved life so much. He told his parents, "Mom, Dad, I love this life so much." He was a ray of sunshine.
So one would assume this is an example of terror bombing, of an attempt to break Ukraine's morale, Ukraine's will to resist. Now, that I think is something that the international community cannot afford to ignore, and we are seeing that they're not ignoring it.
Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs reminded UN members that under international humanitarian law, parties to conflict must protect civilians.
Indiscriminate attacks on civilians are strictly prohibited. There must be limits to how war is waged.
The Permanent Council of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe also urgently convened on Tuesday and strongly condemned the attack. For TVP World, I'm Sonia Gatabiszczan.
We aim to reach an agreement on the selection of projects, legal frameworks and mechanisms for long-term investments, stated Deputy Prime Minister Julia Sviridенko ahead of a key visit to the U.S. by Ukraine's delegation for mineral negotiations. Let's now go to the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, to connect with our correspondent, OSCE. Good evening, Oz. So what are the expectations from the upcoming talks between Ukrainian and U.S. officials on the mineral deal?
Well, look, it's difficult to say. The last we heard from the Foreign Ministry, which is just behind me over there, from Andrii Sybiha, the Foreign Minister, was that the Ukrainians were reviewing the draft proposal of the agreement to see if it complied with Ukraine's laws and Ukraine's constitution. It should be noted that 2 of the deputy ministers that are attending these talks in Washington on Friday and Saturday, they're believed to be, that's according to Bloomberg, reporting that these include economics minister, that's understandable, but also a minister from the Ministry of Justice. So clearly there are legal ramifications for this deal. The Americans are understood to want Ukraine to pay back in full military aid that has been supplied to Ukraine, which Ukraine has never been under the obligation to do so under the Biden administration. These weren't given to Ukraine as a loan. So this is a point of contention between Kyiv and Washington. It's difficult to tell what the next steps are going to be or how Kyiv manages to enforce its will on proceedings, given the imbalance in the relationship between Washington and Kyiv under this administration. So look, it remains to be seen what's going to happen. We do understand that there are going to be no top-level US politicians involved in these talks. So really, we could come out of this without moving much closer towards the moment where Zelensky signs something. this does look like a lot of technical discussions between the relevant departments, between Kyiv and Washington, but it still looks like there's a long way to go. However, Washington and Kyiv will be hoping that this meeting in Washington is going to help move things in the direction that both countries want to see happen.
Thank you so much. That was OSCE Kryvyj reporting live from Kyiv. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk held a meeting with representatives of the automotive industry on Tuesday amid the chaos caused by the introduction of 25% tariffs on vehicles entering the U.S. According to predictions, even though the tariffs will hamper the Polish economy, it's unlikely Poland will find itself in the throes of a long-term crisis. Piotr Miszczuk has more.
Waiting for a long time. We will impose a 25% tariff on all foreign-made automobiles.
Is the statement that sent shockwaves across the global car market. While Germany is expected to be hit hardest, the impact, though to a minor extent, will also reach Poland. In the wake of the US decision, Prime Minister Donald Tusk met with ministers and car industry leaders.
Exports to the US are important for Poland. The United States are our 8th largest export market. With added value, it's our 2nd largest export market.
The automotive industry is Poland's 2nd largest, accounting for around 8% of GDP and employing over 400,000 people. Economists say the tariffs could hamper the growth in the country and shave off up to 0.5% from GDP growth.
It's a kind of bad news for Poland, probably meaning slower growth. We expected the growth in Poland to be around 3%. Now, I would say 2%, maybe 1.5% seems to be more plausible.
The EU-wide tariffs also impact Hungary, one of Trump's closest European allies. While Budapest blames Brussels for the levies, a recent US report singles out Hungary for its extremely high risk of corruption and opaque procurement processes favoring local as well as Chinese companies. The impact of tariffs is also expected to hit hard in like-minded Slovakia.
Slovakia, who is the world champion in the car production per capita and having quite a lot of the export of cars to the United States from the big multinational companies producing the cars in Slovakia, may suffer the most. Maybe Hungary as well. The Czech Republic to a smaller degree, Poland to a smaller degree.
But the concern stretches beyond car parts. Europe now faces a 20% duty on almost all US exported consumer goods. Economists predict that this will have some impact on the Polish economy. However, the country will remain stable.
The Polish economy is predominantly connected to the EU, and more than 80% of the value added that is generated and exported from Poland ends up in the EU.
Others, however, see a silver lining. Poland's former Prime Minister Jan Krzysztof Bielecki believes the changes could actually boost the European economy.
Streams of present manufacturing from Europe could be replaced by the manufacturing more devoted to the defense sector. So that could be an advantage, an upside, not a downside for the economy.
In response to the tariffs, the European Union is preparing retaliatory measures. On Monday, trade ministers reportedly neared an agreement on the first wave of countermeasures that will come into effect on April the 15th. A second wave is likely to follow suit in mid-May.
There is a town in Poland that is dubbed the Polish Iowa, a place that is considered the country's political bellwether. Końskie, a quaint town of only 20,000 people, is credited as having an influence on previous presidential as well as parliamentary elections. This is why this time around presidential hopeful Rafał Trzaskowski has ensured a stop in the village on his agenda. TVP World's Aaron Damon followed him there.
If you look up Końskie on the internet, you'll find a small town with just 20,000 residents, sitting about 2 hours south of Poland's capital, Warsaw. But as the country's presidential vote approaches, this is also a centre of political division.
In Końskie, elections are won, but I don't know if Rafał Trzaskowski will win here.
I'm not really interested in politics, but I don't think he's a bad candidate.
For us, he's the only candidate that should win here, because we are the ones that law and justice associates with. The only way for us is for Rafał to become president.
He's a swimmer. He just floats in his speeches and promises. After all, there were supposed to be debates in Końskie, but Trzaskowski didn't come. Duda did. He didn't show up. Maybe he was afraid.
These locals are talking about centrist frontrunner Rafał Trzaskowski, who infamously refused to turn up for a head-to-head TV debate with current president and ally of the right-wing Law and Justice Party, Andrzej Duda, in 2020. That was viewed as playing a role in Trzaskowski failing to beat Duda 5 years ago. So when Końskie emerged on Trzaskowski's campaign agenda, TVP World hit the road and joined him.
Ladies and gentlemen, if we win right here, in all these cities and towns, that's when we have a chance to win nationwide. And perhaps those who say that elections are won in Końskie are right.
Końskie in Poland is a little bit like Midtown in the United States, the hometown of J.D. Vance. So I think Końskie in Świętokrzyskie Voivodeship represent the Poland of small and medium-sized towns, the towns which are facing more or less similar problems after transition. Końskie is a symbol of peripheral Poland, and I think that this is key for civic platform for Rafał Trzaskowski to win those elections.
A key symbol of peripheral Poland that Trzaskowski's supporters insist will go his way.
Rafał Trzaskowski is not a person who is overly confident. He is not a vain person, as good polling results would make one think, I have victory in my pocket. I see how hard he works, how he strives and convinces the residents in every city he visits.
Trzaskowski has good reason to be confident. Another polling snapshot on Tuesday puts him in the driving seat, possibly picking up almost 40% in the first round. It comes as the law and justice candidate, Eurosceptic historian Karol Nawrocki faces an uphill battle, with the far-right libertarian Sławomir Mencen breathing down his neck. Both have already visited Końskie. That means Law and Justice is hitting the history books to pick up support, organising a patriotic march on Saturday to mark the 1000th anniversary of the Polish Kingdom.
They need to bring 100% of right-wing voters to the polls. With that, they can looking for a kind of success in the second round, because we must remember that nobody, no matter what, and no matter who is going to win the second round, the most important is the voters of so-called normals, people who are not very devoted politically.
An announcement of that march forced the hand of Trzaskowski's camp, who are planning a similar demonstration on May the 25th. That's after the first round of voting on May the 18th, but before the final runoff on June the 1st. Back in Końskie, all eyes are on how votes will fall in this Polish bellwether. Aaron Darman, TVP World.
Ukraine has initiated an urgent meeting of the UN Security Council and a special meeting of the OSCE Permanent Council following Russia's deadly attack on Kryvyj Rih. Joining me now to discuss the latest situation in Ukraine in terms of security, but also Tuesday's meetings and upcoming negotiations regarding a mineral deal is Timofey Milovanov, president of the Kyiv School of Economics and former Ukrainian economy minister. Good evening and welcome to World News Tonight.
Good evening.
So, UN Security Council and the OSCE meeting. We've heard from Andrii Sybiha, who said will help to advance peace efforts and accountability. But we also heard his response on X. So let's take a look at that for a moment, shall we?
Russia must cease its terror against Ukrainian children and civilians, respond to US full ceasefire proposal, which Ukraine has accepted, and end the war.
So we've heard that, we've seen the meetings, but realistically, can the UN Security Council hold Russia accountable for what's been happening so far, especially now when we consider the movements of the US administration?
Well, even before that, the United Nations Security Council would not be able to hold Russia accountable because Russia has a veto power and it vetoes any kind of resolutions against Russia. So that is impossible. However, what the role is of the United Nations Security Council is to have a conversation about the topic and bring the world attention to the situation. Here specifically today, the issue is that Ukraine has accepted the ceasefire, but Russia continues to bombard, bomb, and hit Ukraine with drones, killing multiple civilians and children even every day, especially a recent horrendous attack on Kryvyj Rih, where 6 children were killed, over 24 wounded, 16 adults have been killed instantly, and many more are in very tough medical condition. The current position of the United States administration continues to be of the form that we do not challenge Russia at all while we're in negotiations with Russia. For example, that was recently given as an answer by National Economic Advisor Hassett about why President Trump didn't impose tariffs on Russia. So the U.S. keeps the door open, but it looks like Russia is not doing anything to enter into this door. So we'll see what the U.S. reaction in the future will be.
Which takes me to my next question. We've also heard during the UN Security Council from Tom Fletcher, the UN Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs. Let's take a moment to listen to what he had to say.
Under international humanitarian law that this council is here to defend, parties to conflicts must protect civilians and civilian infrastructure. Indiscriminate attacks on civilians are strictly prohibited. There must be limits to how war is waged.
So we've heard from Mr. Fletcher. We've heard about the prohibition of targeting civilians, and yet there is evidence that Russia is actually trying to target civilians, as we've heard in our report earlier today. So what is the next move by the international community now, especially that we've heard from Russia saying that they're going to refrain from attacking civilians, and they go against their own words?
That's a typical Russian tactics. They say one thing and do another thing. It's very hard to believe that that's the case for any person who lives in democracy, because simply the nature of our culture, of our norms, is that we do not so blatantly lie. We do not say that we're going to be good humans, and then tomorrow we commit war crimes, we kill children, rape women, and then pretend we didn't do it and force everyone to prove it. And if they prove it, we pivot and accuse the others. So this is a very mafia-like or sort of very criminal-like tactic. And simply people in democracies are not used to this. They do not expect, it goes against our nature to expect that kind of tactics from a state. But that's what Russia does. What's next for the international law? Well, it's impossible to make Russia accountable, frankly, if we are honest to ourselves, unless it loses. Is it possible for Russia to lose? It looks not at the moment with the U.S. position. That's not possible. And maybe even with the U.S. support, it is not possible at the moment. So we will have to live in the world where the best outcome for us is to contain Russia. And we have to be very open-minded and very realistic about the threat Russia presents and work together on that.
The attack we've seen, the attack on Ukraine, is this a telling sign of what's to come in the possible spring offensive? What are Ukraine's expectations when it comes to Russia's movements in weeks to come?
Yes, an excellent question. There is a fear of a spring offensive, a major offensive. Actually, Russia is on offense right now and continues to take some of the, make some advances, but they're very gradual. The question is whether there will be an escalation, and maybe Russia will enter in different areas of Ukraine, in Sumy, for example, or Chernihiv. I don't think that's likely, but purely hypothetical, that is possible. It will be a clear sign to the world and specifically to the new administration in the United States that Russia is not serious and is not willing to move towards ceasefire. So the question is then that what the US will have to do. The US will either be able to choose to support Ukraine and Europe in containing Russia, which I think is unlikely at the moment, or lose kind of interest in the deal. And I think it will be up to Europe to then deal with the security situation in the East.
Earlier today, we've learned about the Ukrainian military capturing 2 Chinese citizens who were fighting on the Russian side. Meanwhile, in March, China offered to be a part of the coalition of the willing in what could be potential peacekeeping forces in the future. From the Ukrainian perspective, do you think that China could be trusted?
Well, that's an excellent question. I do not want to say that China cannot be trusted, but it's also true that a majority of supplies for defense industry in Russia came from China. The Kyiv School of Economics has recently posted a report that up to 76% of inputs came from China. So China is extremely important partner for enabling Russia to continue its war. So can China be trusted? I think everyone has its own answer to that question. I think we have to be very, very careful, but we also have to be open-minded given the dynamics between the US and China. Now, this development of 2 soldiers, Chinese soldiers, captured on the territory of Ukraine, not like North Korea in Kursk, on Russian territory, but on the territory of Ukraine. So that's a very serious, threatening sign. If these guys there are by some kind of, secret agreement between China and Russia, that basically means that China has put its troops on the territory of Ukraine. I really hope that's not the case. It's too early to say, but we should be very watchful to see if China entered the war in some form.
Definitely, this is something to be tracked in the future, in the days and weeks to come. Another important event is going to take place this week. We know that Ukraine delegation is set to travel to the U.S. to discuss the mineral deal. As we read in Yulia Sviridenko's post on X, she's first Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Economy of Ukraine, she said, I quote, "We aim to align on project selection, legal frameworks, and long-term investment mechanisms." What is Ukraine going to agree to in order to make this deal happen? And when could we expect this deal to be signed?
One point of disagreement is whether Ukraine has to pay back to the United States the amount of support that has already been provided by the previous administration. The Ukrainian position, that is not possible, that is repatriations, and we should not be doing that. It's extremely unfair and it's also against the law and agreements. Whereas the US position has to be that we have sacrificed so much and have given so much support to Ukraine, we have to get something back. Ukrainian position with respect to that is, yes, let's invest together and let's earn together in the future. And so that's a negotiation which is happening. I've seen some of the versions of the deal in the earlier round of negotiations, and they've been going back and forth. It looks like there are very reasonable people on both sides, but there are also people within the administration or negotiation teams who are working on derailing the deal. There are also people who want to get the best deal possible for the United States. So it's a lot of different interests coalescing together, and I think it might be difficult to achieve that deal immediately, but I hope it will be possible.
Do you think that this deal is going to threaten Ukraine's future integration with the EU? Because that was one of the premises of Ukraine not wanting to sign that deal.
Well, so one of the versions indeed violated, it required the right of first, basically choice, the right of refusal, the right of the first refusal for the United States on all projects, even those projects which are conditionality projects in the already existing agreements. And that was a very maximalist demand, completely ignoring the existing arrangements and the future integration needs of Ukraine. But I believe that will be worked out.
Thank you so much, Timofey Milovanov, former Ukrainian economy minister. Pleasure to have you on the program. And so this would be all for now here on World News Tonight, but please do stay tuned. We're back in just a moment with more news and features, and we'll see you there.